The big meeting room was very quiet. Ambassador Gregory Mitchell from Earth stood in front of everyone. Around him, leaders from 47 different alien species watched. Most of them did not believe humans could help. The humans had asked for this special meeting. They said they had soldiers who could fight the Vrex swarm. The Vrex were bad aliens who had been attacking council worlds for 3 years. Many planets had already fallen. Commander Xyloth was from the Kreenar Empire. His people had been warriors for thousands of years. He made a clicking sound with his mouthparts. It meant he thought humans were foolish. What could these new species possibly do? His people were strong and had fought many wars. Humans were just babies in space, Gregory spoke calmly. A machine changed his words into the language everyone could understand. He said the council understood their doubt. The Vrex had taken over 12 colony worlds. The council fleets could not match their numbers. Council soldiers died from Vrex poison weapons. They needed something different. Something new. High Priestess Marana stood up. She was from the celestial domains. Her body was made of crystal and light bounced off her. She asked what humans could possibly have that the council lacked. Humans had only been in space for 200 years. That was nothing compared to the thousands of years other species had traveled among the stars. Gregory nodded toward the side door. He asked if he could introduce Lieutenant Colonel Jake Harper and his team. Everyone looked at the door. They were curious but still doubtful. What could a few human soldiers show them that would make any difference? 6 humans walked into the chamber. They wore simple black uniforms. There were no fancy decorations or medals. They moved in a special way. It was smooth and careful. Several alien military officers sat up straighter. They noticed something different about these humans. There was danger in the way they walked, like predators who were holding back their power. Gregory explained that these were members of what humans called Special Operations Forces. He wanted to show what they could do. There was a mining colony on a planet called Terraform 7. It had fallen to the Vrex 3 weeks ago. The human team would take it back. Commander Xyloth laughed. It was a harsh sound. That world had 10,000 Vrex warriors on it. 6 human soldiers would be killed quickly. It was impossible. The math did not work. 6 against 10,000 meant certain death. Jake Harper spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but everyone could hear him clearly. He corrected Commander Xyloth. The full team was 12 soldiers, not 6, and they would not be killed. They would take the planet back. His voice was calm and sure. He was not bragging. He was just stating a fact. The silence that followed was broken by laughter. Several alien groups laughed at the idea. 12 against 10,000 was crazy. It was insulting to even suggest it. No species in the galaxy could do such a thing. Not even the mighty Kreenar warriors or the advanced celestial armies. Gregory made his offer. Give the humans 72 hours. 3 days. If they failed, the Council could punish Earth however they wanted. But if they succeeded, the Council would listen to what humanity proposed. They would take humans seriously. The Council agreed. Most of them wanted to see what would happen. They thought it would be funny to watch humans fail. They would broadcast everything across all Council channels. Let the whole galaxy see what happened when young species got too confident. It would be a good lesson. 2 days later, the team was ready. They went down to the planet in a special stealth pod. It was nighttime when they landed. They came down in the mountains far from the main Vrex base. Council observers watched through satellites in space. They expected to see the humans die quickly and badly. Instead, they saw something they could not believe. The humans moved through terrible ground. They climbed up cliff faces that would kill most species. Council assault troops would need flying machines to climb those cliffs. The humans just used their hands and feet and special ropes. They crossed rivers that had acid in them from the mining work. They did all of this without making any sound. Their body heat was hidden by special technology the Council had never seen before. Jake Harper and Sergeant Nicole Carter got into position on top of a hill. Below them was a Vrex patrol route. Nicole put together her rifle very fast. She had done it many times before. Jake used special glasses to look at the enemy. The glasses looked old compared to Council technology, but somehow they gave better information about the battlefield. Nicole whispered into her radio. The range was 800 meters. That meant the targets were very far away. The wind was blowing from the southeast at 12 knots. There were 5 targets. She was calculating everything in her head. Wind speed, distance, temperature, all the things that would affect her bullets. Jake told her to take them. Nicole fired 5 shots very quickly. 5 Vrex warriors fell down dead. The shots were so fast that the Vrex died before they even heard the sound of the gun. Nicole was already taking apart her rifle and moving away. She was gone before the bodies hit the ground. In the council chamber, Commander Xyloth leaned forward. That shooting was very good, better than he expected, but it meant nothing. The Vrex would swarm the humans now. They would find them and kill them. There was no escape once the Vrex knew where you were, but the Vrex never found them. By the time the Vrex army arrived at the place where their warriors died, the humans were 3 kilometers away. They were setting up another trap, and another one after that, and another one. The humans were like ghosts. They appeared, killed, and vanished. For 2 whole days, the galaxy watched 12 humans destroy a Vrex army. They attacked at sunrise and sunset. They hit supply trucks and communication towers. They set traps that killed dozens of Vrex at once. They moved like they were invisible. They appeared where the Vrex did not expect them. They disappeared before help could come. Corporal Danny Wright and Private Amy Hudson did something impossible. They got into the main mining building by swimming through the cooling pipes. Council military experts had said this was impossible. No species could hold their breath that long. But the humans did it. They came up right in the middle of the Vrex command center. They killed the leaders and turned off the shields. No one knew they were there until it was too late. Master Sergeant Kevin Stone led a team of 3 people. Lisa Morgan and Ryan Bell were with him. They attacked the eastern wall of the base. They made a lot of noise and drew half the Vrex army toward them. Then they disappeared into the forest. They left behind only dead Vrex and confusion. The Vrex had no idea where the humans had gone. When the 72 hours were almost over, Jake Harper sent a message. He used all the radio frequencies. He spoke in perfect Vrex language. His message was simple and clear. Surrender now. Leave this world in 6 hours. Or we finish this. The threat was delivered in a calm voice. Not angry, not excited, just stating what would happen. The Vrex had never retreated before. In all of their history, they had never run away from a fight. But they left Terraform 7 in 4 hours. They left behind 3,000 dead warriors. The remaining soldiers were too scared to fight anymore. 12 humans had broken an entire army. 12 humans. None of them were hurt. One planet was free again. The council chamber was completely silent when Gregory Mitchell came back. Jake Harper and his team stood behind him. They looked the same as when they left. Maybe a little dirty, but otherwise normal. They did not look like they had just done the impossible. Gregory spoke quietly. He reminded the council that they wanted to know what humanity could offer. These soldiers were called Special Forces, and they were only the beginning. There were more, many more. The galaxy had just seen what 12 could do. Now they needed to imagine what thousands could do. The message was clear. Humanity had been hiding its true strength. Now the council understood why humans had survived and grown despite being so young in space. They had warriors unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 3 months passed after the Terraform 7 mission. The Galactic Council approved the first training program with humans. Soldiers from 15 different species came to Earth. They went to a human military base called Fort Braxton. They came to learn what made human special forces so good at fighting. Most aliens expected to find secret weapons or special drugs that made humans stronger. What they found was much more scary. Colonel Jake Harper stood in a simple training room. He looked at all the alien officers. He welcomed them to the Special Forces Assessment and Selection course. Over the next 3 weeks, they would do the same tests that every human candidate faces. Usually, 85% of candidates fail. Only 15 out of every 100 pass. Captain Xerxon was from the Turian Guard. His people were born warriors. They had been bred for fighting for thousands of years. He thought an 85% failure rate was impossible. His species was too strong to fail human tests. He was confident and proud. The first week broke half of them. 23 aliens quit or failed. The humans called it stress inoculation. The word meant getting used to terrible stress. The candidates were pushed beyond what they thought they could do. Then they were pushed even more. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake was a training instructor. She had 15 years of experience. She led them through navigation exercises. They had to find their way across hundreds of kilometers with almost no equipment, no GPS satellites to guide them. No advanced technology, just paper maps, magnetic compasses, and their own bodies. Lieutenant Krath was from the Fenrir packs. His species had 4 legs and could run for days without stopping. But he collapsed at a checkpoint. He was breathing hard and could not understand. How were these 2-legged humans faster than him? His body was built for running. Humans looked weak in comparison. Sarah checked his health signs. She explained that humans trained for this every single day, for years and years. The candidates he saw had been preparing for selection since they were children. Many of them had failed dozens of times before they succeeded. What he was experiencing now was just the beginning. It would get much harder. The second week introduced combat training. This was not the formal, structured combat that most species practiced. The humans called it close quarters battle. It meant fighting in tight spaces where guns were not useful. Staff Sergeant Chris Palmer showed techniques that made several observers feel sick to their stomachs. Chris explained that in special forces they fought to win, not to be honorable. His voice was calm and casual. If he needed to gouge out an eye, he would do it. If he needed to break a joint backwards, he would do it. If he needed to crush a throat, he would do it. There were no rules in actual combat except survive and complete the mission. Honor did not matter when you were dying. He worked with Corporal Jenny Lewis to show everyone. The hand-to-hand combat that followed was brutal and efficient. Every move was designed to hurt badly or kill. There was no wasted motion. No fancy spins or jumps like in movies, just cold, calculated violence. Each strike had a purpose. Each technique was tested in real combat. Observer Kalinda was from the Enlightened Collective. She protested loudly. This was barbaric. Where was the discipline? Where was the control? Her people believed in fighting with honor and following rules. This human way seemed wrong and savage. Jenny wiped sweat from her face. She replied that the control came from knowing when to use these techniques. They trained until it became instinct. When someone was trying to kill you, you did not think. You just reacted, and your reaction needed to be faster and more violent than theirs. Otherwise, you died. It was that simple. By the third week, only 12 candidates remained from the original 47. More than 30 aliens had quit or failed. The remaining 12 learned about human tactics, equipment, and philosophy. Major Tom Bradley taught them about psychological operations. He showed them how humans used information and fear as weapons. Sometimes scaring the enemy was better than killing them. Captain Rachel Moore demonstrated medical training. She showed how field operators could perform emergency surgery with very little equipment. Sometimes you had to save your teammate in the middle of a battle with just a knife and some bandages. But the final exercise truly revealed what made human special forces unique. The candidates were dropped into a survival scenario with no warning. Enemy forces hunted them through hostile terrain. The enemies were played by veteran human operators. Sergeant First Class Lauren Davis led one of the hunting teams. The candidates had no weapons, no food, and no support. They had 72 hours to avoid capture and reach a pickup point. If they were caught, they failed. Captain Zerkson was one of only 2 Turian guards remaining. He found himself hiding in a cave. Human hunters passed within meters of his position. He could almost touch them. He had trained his entire life for combat. He was stronger than any human, faster, more durable. His body was superior in every way. But these humans moved through the forest like they were part of it. They were silent. They read tracks he did not even know he was leaving. They knew where he would go before he decided to go there. When they finally caught him, it was 16 hours before the exercise ended. Sergeant First Class Lauren Davis reached out her hand to help him stand up. She had genuine respect in her eyes. She said he made a good run. He made them work for it. That was a compliment from her. Zerkson asked the question that had been bothering him. How did humans do this? They had no enhanced genetics, no cybernetic parts in their bodies, no special biological advantages. By all physical measures, his species should dominate humans in every way. He was built to be a better warrior. So why did he lose? Lauren smiled. She explained that humans adapt. That was what humans did better than any other species in the galaxy. Humans could not fly, so they built machines to fly. Humans could not breathe underwater, so they learned to hold their breath for a very long time. They were not the strongest or the fastest species, so they became smarter, more determined, and more willing to do whatever it took to win. They never gave up. They always found a way. Of the 12 candidates who made it to the final week, only 3 passed. 9 more failed in that last brutal test. The 3 who passed returned to their homeworlds with a new understanding. They had new respect for human capabilities. But more importantly, they returned with a warning for their governments and military leaders. If this was what human special forces could do, what would happen if humanity ever turned that capability against the Council itself? What if humans decided the Council was their enemy? Could anyone stop them? The 3 graduates did not think so. They had seen what 12 humans did to 10,000 Virex. They had experienced the training that created such warriors. They understood now that humans were not just another species. They were something different. Something dangerous. The training program continued. More alien soldiers came to Earth, most of them failed. A few passed and returned home changed. They spread the word. Human special forces were not just good soldiers. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. They were proof that sometimes the most dangerous species was not the one with the biggest teeth or the strongest muscles. Sometimes it was the one that refused to quit no matter what. The one that would do anything to win. The one that turned weakness into strength through pure determination and endless training. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Humans might be young in space. They might lack the technology of older species. They might not have enhanced bodies or natural weapons. But they had something more important. They had the will to become whatever they needed to be. And that made them the most terrifying warriors the galaxy had ever known. The war with the Vrex swarm had reached a critical point. Even with human special forces helping, the Vrex kept advancing. Intelligence reports suggested they were getting support from somewhere deep in unexplored space. The Council needed answers. They needed to know where this help was coming from. Admiral Patricia Hill sat in the briefing room on the Council flagship. Around her were the highest-ranking military minds in the galaxy. She explained that the Vrex were getting supplies and reinforcements from somewhere. Council scouts had tracked their supply ships back to a system the Vrex called the Nexus. It was 3 weeks away even, using the fastest jump routes through. Space. Fleet Commander Rylon from the Ardian Navy said it was impossible to investigate. Regular scouts would need months to reach that far and return safely. By then, the Vrex would have conquered another dozen worlds. Time was running out. They needed information now, not in 6 months. Admiral Hill looked toward the back of the room. She said they were not sending regular scouts. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Harper stood there with a new team. They were sending special forces. The mission was called Operation Ghost Sword. 18 Special Forces operators would insert into Vrex space. They would travel through hostile territory for 3 weeks. They would infiltrate the Nexus facility. They would gather intelligence about who was helping the Virex. If possible, they would sabotage the facility. The survival probability, according to Council calculations, was less than 5%. 95 out of 100 teams would die attempting this mission. Jake Harper looked at the numbers and shrugged. He said they had done worse odds before. His voice was calm. He was not worried. The other operators with him showed the same confidence. They had trained for missions like this. Impossible odds were normal for them. The team included veterans from Terraform 7. Master Sergeant Nicole Carter would handle long-range reconnaissance. That meant she would scout ahead and watch for enemies. Captain Danny Wright led the demolitions team. They would blow things up if needed. Major Kevin Stone commanded the security element. His job was to keep everyone safe during the mission. Lieutenant Amy Hudson specialized in technical intelligence. She could hack computers and steal data. They launched from a stealth frigate at the edge of Council space. From there, they would use captured Vrex vessels and whatever else they could find to reach their target. The first week was relatively quiet. The team moved through the outer systems carefully. They avoided detection by staying in the gaps between Vrex patrol routes. They lived off captured supplies. They ate Vrex food and drank Vrex water. Sergeant Chris Palmer proved very useful. He had learned to read Vrex navigation logs during his free time. Now that skill was saving their lives. Chris noted that the Vrex were surprisingly organized for a species everyone thought operated on pure instinct. Most people believed the Vrex were just mindless bugs who swarmed and attacked. But they had supply schedules. They had maintenance protocols. They even had what looked like performance reviews for ship captains. They were intelligent and organized. Jake replied that this meant the Vrex could be predicted. They followed patterns. Patterns could be exploited. He told Chris to mark all the patterns they found. They would use them later to their advantage. The second week brought their first major challenge. A Vrex patrol caught them refueling at an automated station. The humans needed fuel for their stolen ship. They had no choice but to stop. The brief firefight that followed showed why human special forces were so feared across the galaxy. The Vrex numbered 30 soldiers. The humans were only 18, but the humans controlled the battlefield from the first second. Corporal Lisa Morgan climbed up to a high position and provided covering fire. Staff Sergeant Ryan Bell directed the other operators and coordinated their shots. The Vrex never got organized enough to mount an effective assault. They were confused and disorganized. Within 6 minutes, the station was secure and the team was gone. They left behind only questions for the Vrex response force that arrived hours later. The Vrex found their dead comrades, but no clue about who killed them or where they went. As they pushed deeper into Vrex space, the team began to notice something unusual. The Vrex were not just receiving supplies. They were receiving training, real military training, and the trainers were not Vrex. Someone else was teaching them how to fight better. Lieutenant Amy Hudson analyzed surveillance footage from a Vrex training facility. She reported unknown ship designs. The ships did not match any design in the Council database. Whoever these people were, they were teaching the Vrex tactical coordination and advanced weapons handling. The Vrex were becoming more dangerous because of this training. The Nexus itself was more fortress than supply depot. The facility spread across an entire asteroid field. Weapons platforms and shield generators protected every approach. Council military analysts had estimated it would take a full battle fleet to breach the defenses. Hundreds of ships with thousands of soldiers. It was one of the most defended places in known space. The Human Special Forces team studied it for 3 days. They watched the patrols. They noted the shift changes. They identified the weak points. Then they infiltrated through the waste disposal system. They went in through the garbage tunnels. Sergeant First Class Lauren Davis led the insertion team through tunnels that smelled terrible. No one had considered these tunnels as potential access points because they were so disgusting. Lauren explained over the radio that if something stinks and everyone avoids it, that was exactly where Special Forces wanted to be. Her voice was distorted by her breathing mask, but her point was clear. Go where the enemy does not expect you. Inside the facility, they discovered the truth. The mystery species called themselves the Architect Collective. They were using the Vrex as a proxy force. That meant they were using the Vrex to do their fighting for them. They were testing Council defenses and military capabilities. The Vrex were not the real threat. They were just pawns. The Architects were preparing for something bigger. A full invasion of Council space. Jake Harper made a decision immediately. They could not just gather intelligence and leave. If the Architects were preparing for a larger invasion, the Council needed time to prepare. The humans had to slow down the enemy. They had to hurt them badly. Jake announced they were going kinetic. That was military slang for using violence. Full demolition. They would turn this place into an asteroid field. They would destroy everything. The mission had changed from reconnaissance to sabotage. What followed was 12 hours of controlled chaos. Captain Danny Wright and his demolitions team placed explosive charges throughout the facility. They targeted critical infrastructure, power generators, life support systems, docking bays, fuel storage, everything that made the Nexus work. Major Kevin Stone and his security element kept the corridors clear. They engaged Vrex and Architect forces in running gunfights that echoed through the station. The sounds of battle were everywhere. Lieutenant Amy Hudson hacked into the central computers. She downloaded everything she could find while simultaneously uploading computer viruses that would corrupt their backup systems. The extraction was supposed to be quick and clean. Instead, it turned into a running battle through the docking bay. The Architects finally realized what was happening. They threw everything they had at the humans. Master Sergeant Nicole Carter took control of a gun platform and provided covering fire. Her incredible accuracy allowed the rest of the team to reach their ship. She killed dozens of enemies, buying precious seconds for her teammates. They launched their ship just as the first charges detonated. The Nexus began to tear itself apart. A series of cascading explosions destroyed decades of Architect preparation. The facility that had taken years to build was gone in minutes. Thousands of Vrex warriors died in the explosions. Dozens of Architect trainers and commanders died. The entire operation was crippled. The journey back took 2 weeks of constant evasion and improvisation. They fought their way through 3 separate ambushes. They survived 4 near misses with Rex patrols. They had to repair their damaged ship 6 times using spare parts and clever engineering. When they finally jumped back into Council space, the ship was barely holding together. It looked like it might fall apart at any moment, but all 18 operators returned. Mission complete. 0 casualties. Not a single human died. They had penetrated deep into enemy territory, destroyed a major facility, and escaped. The galaxy could barely believe it was possible. The intelligence they brought back changed everything. The Council now knew about the architects. They could prepare for the real threat instead of just fighting the Vrex. But more importantly, the galaxy learned that human special forces could penetrate anywhere, strike any target, and return against any odds. There was nowhere they could not reach. No defense they could not breach. No mission they considered impossible. The victories were celebrated across Council space. Human special forces had become legendary. Their operations were studied in military schools on 100 different worlds. Everyone wanted to know their secrets. But few people understood the real price humanity paid for these successes. The cost was higher than anyone knew. Major Rachel Moore ran the Special Forces medical facility at Fort Braxton. She saw what the galaxy did not see. The operators who returned from missions were rarely the same people who left. Something changed in them. Something broke or bent that could never be fully fixed. Rachel explained to a visiting Council medical observer that physical wounds heal. Broken bones mend, cuts close, but the psychological trauma compounds with every operation. It builds up like poison in the mind. Humans were not naturally built for the kind of warfare Special Forces conducted. They had to train people to override their survival instincts. They taught them to function in situations that should break them mentally. Sometimes the training worked too well. The operators forgot how to be normal people. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Harper sat in her office one evening. This was 6 months after Operation Ghost Sword. He was supposed to be on leave, resting and recovering from his injuries. But Rachel could see the weight he carried went beyond physical damage. There was something in his eyes, a darkness that had not been there before. Jake spoke quietly. He said he lost 3 people last week. It was a training exercise, a vehicle accident. Nothing heroic or mission critical. Just bad luck and bad timing. A truck rolled over on rough terrain. 3 good operators died instantly. Rachel said she had heard about it. Sergeant Carlos Ruiz, Specialist Hannah Brooks, and Private Tyler Grant. All of them were good operators with promising careers ahead of them. Jake continued. Carlos was going to retire next year. He had served for 20 years and was looking forward to spending time with his grandchildren. Hannah had just gotten married 6 months ago. Her husband was still waiting for her to come home. Tyler was only 23 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. They had survived the Nexus mission. They had survived Terraform 7. They had survived a dozen other operations that should have killed them all, and then they died in a simple training accident. It made no sense. It felt wrong and unfair. This was the cost the galaxy did not see. For every successful operation, there were operators dealing with injuries that never fully healed, old wounds that hurt when it rained, backs that ached from carrying heavy equipment, knees that gave out without warning. There were relationships destroyed by constant deployments, marriages that fell apart because one person was always gone, children who grew up barely knowing their parents. And there were minds scarred by things they could never fully explain to people who had not experienced it. Master Sergeant Nicole Carter discovered that the skills that made her valuable in combat made civilian life nearly impossible. Simple, loud noises triggered responses she could not control. A car backfiring sounded like gunfire. She would drop to the ground and reach for a weapon that was not there. She woke up at night in a cold sweat, reaching for guns, scanning for threats that did not exist. Her family tried to understand, but they could not. How could they? She could not tell them about the things she had done, the people she had killed, the split-second decisions that meant life or death. Those memories belonged to a world they would never see. Captain Danny Wright threw himself into work. He took every mission that was available. He volunteered for the dangerous ones. His wife Jennifer waited at home with their 2 children. She never knew if he would return. She understood the importance of his work. She supported his service to humanity and the Council. But the constant uncertainty was slowly destroying their marriage. The wondering, the waiting, the fear every time there was a knock on the door. During one of their rare video calls, Jennifer pleaded with him. She asked him to come home. The kids missed him. They asked about him every single day. When was Daddy coming home? Why was he always gone? They were growing up without him. Danny promised he would come home soon. Just one more deployment. They needed him for this mission. It was important. It would save lives. Just one more, and then he would take leave. He would spend time with the family. They would go on vacation somewhere nice, but it was always one more deployment. There was always another mission, another crisis, another situation where they needed experienced operators. The war never stopped needing soldiers. The Council began requesting human special forces teams for increasingly dangerous missions. The humans were too effective to keep in reserve. They were too good to save for only the most critical operations. Admiral Patricia Hill found herself in constant meetings with Council officials. These officials saw human operators as a resource to be used, a tool to be deployed wherever needed. They did not see them as people who could break and die. Admiral Hill argued with them. She said they were burning out the operators. She explained that these were not machines. They were people. Real human beings with families and lives. They broke under stress. They died in combat. And humanity was losing them faster than they could replace them. The training took years. You could not just make new Special Forces operators overnight. The response from Council Military Command was cold and practical. Then train more operators. The war continues. We need them. The galaxy needs them. Personal costs do not matter when billions of lives are at stake. But training more Special Forces operators was not simple. The selection process was brutal by design. It had to be that way. Only those who could survive the training had any chance of surviving the actual missions. And even then, many did not make it. The training was designed to break people, to find their limits and push past them. Most candidates failed. That was expected. That was necessary. Sergeant First Class Lauren Davis taught at the training facility now. She had been injured on a mission and could no longer serve in the field. So she trained the next generation. She saw the candidates arrive full of determination and confidence. Young men and women who wanted to be heroes, who wanted to make a difference. She watched most of them fail. She watched them break down, cry, give up. The few who succeeded often looked older than their years by the time they graduated. They had aged decades in just a few months. One evening, Lauren talked with Staff Sergeant Chris Palmer. She confided that they were asking too much of the operators. The operational tempo was unsustainable. That meant they were being sent on missions too frequently. They had no time to rest and recover between deployments. Eventually, something had to give. Something would break. Either the operators or the system itself. Chris replied quietly that it always did. Something always broke eventually. That was part of the job. They kept going until they could not go anymore. Then someone else took their place. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked in human military history. Soldiers served until they could not serve anymore. The breaking point came 6 weeks later. A team led by Captain Lisa Morgan was compromised during a reconnaissance mission in Architect space. Their cover was blown. They were discovered. They called for extraction, but the Council fleet was engaged elsewhere. There was heavy fighting in another system. The humans were on their own for 72 hours. 3 days against overwhelming enemy forces with no support and no rescue coming. When the extraction finally arrived 3 days later, they found 4 survivors out of 12. 8 operators were dead. Captain Lisa Morgan had held her position to the very end. She bought time for her remaining team members to escape. She fought alone against dozens of enemies. She did not make it to the extraction point. Her body was never recovered. The memorial service was attended by operators from every Special Forces unit. Hundreds of soldiers stood in their dress uniforms. Jake Harper stood at attention, his face showing no emotion as names were read aloud. Nicole Carter wept quietly, finally allowing herself to show the grief she usually kept hidden. Danny Wright held his wife Jennifer's hand tightly. He realized how close he had come to leaving his children without a father. How many times he had almost died. How lucky he was to still be alive. The galaxy celebrated human special forces as heroes. They were right to do so. These were heroes. But heroism came with a cost that could never be fully calculated or understood by those who did not serve. Every successful mission meant operators who would carry those memories forever. The faces of people they killed, the sounds of battle, the smell of blood and smoke. Every victory meant families waiting at home, hoping and praying their loved ones would return safely. Every deployment meant rolling dice with lives that could never be replaced. Each person was unique and valuable and irreplaceable, and still they volunteered. People kept signing up even though they knew the cost. Because someone had to do it. Because the alternative was worse. Because if they did not fight, someone else would suffer. That was what human special forces did. They paid the price so others would not have to. They carried the burden so civilians could sleep safely. They went to dark places so the rest of humanity could stay in the light. The war reached its most dangerous point 18 months after humanity revealed its special forces capability. The Architect Collective was furious. Humans had destroyed their Nexus facility. Humans had disrupted their careful plans. Now they wanted revenge. They launched a full-scale invasion of Council space. 3,000 warships jumped in at once. They brought Vrek shock troops with them. They had new weapons that could shatter planetary shields like breaking glass. Nothing the Council had could stop these weapons. The Council fleet fought desperately, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. The Architects had better ships and better tactics. World after world fell to the invasion. Billions of people died or were enslaved. The Architects pushed toward the Council capital at Primara Prime. That was where the galaxy's government was located, where billions of civilians waited for help that was not coming. Everyone knew if Primara Prime fell, the war was over. Admiral Patricia Hill called an emergency meeting. Only the most important military leaders attended. The situation was clear and terrible. The conventional fleet could not stop the Architects. Traditional warfare was not working. They needed something different. They needed something impossible. They needed human special forces to do what they did best. Admiral Hill explained the plan. They needed to destroy the Architect command structure. The enemy fleet operated from a massive command ship called the Sovereign. It was at the center of their formation. Protected by 300 warships and the most powerful shields in the galaxy, if they could destroy the Sovereign, the Architect coordination would collapse. The fleet would fall apart without leadership and communication. Jake Harper, now a full colonel, spoke quietly. He pointed out the obvious problem. This was a suicide mission. There was no way to get a strike force through that much firepower and back out again. This was a one-way trip. Everyone who went would die. There would be no rescue, no extraction, no coming home. Admiral Hill's voice was heavy with regret. She said she knew. She understood what she was asking. But if they did not try, every world in the Council would fall, including Earth. Humanity's homeworld would be conquered or destroyed. All their families, all their friends, everyone they loved would die or become slaves. This mission was the only chance to save them. The room fell silent. Every operator present understood exactly what was being asked of them. This was not a mission with low probability of survival. This was certain death. But it was also a mission that might save billions of lives, maybe trillions. The choice was simple but terrible. Die for sure, or let everyone else die instead. Master Sergeant Nicole Carter was the first to speak. Her voice was steady and strong despite knowing what she was volunteering for. She said she was in. She would go on this mission. She would die if it meant saving humanity and the Council. Major Kevin Stone added his voice. He said he would go too. One by one around the room, operators nodded their agreement. Captain Danny Wright thought of his wife Jennifer and his 2 children. He wanted to see them grow up. He wanted to be there for them. But he also wanted them to have a future, a world to grow up in. Sergeant Chris Palmer remembered all the young recruits he had trained, all those hopeful faces. He wanted them to have a chance to live their lives. Lieutenant Amy Hudson considered all the intelligence reports she had filed over the years. All of them had pointed to this moment. This final confrontation. They all knew this was the end of their lives. But they also knew it was necessary. Someone had to do it. If not them, then who? They were the best soldiers humanity had ever produced. If they could not do this mission, nobody could. The plan was insane even by Special Forces standards. Even for people who did impossible things regularly. A stealth frigate would get them close to the Architect fleet. They would hide in the chaos of the ongoing battle. From there, they would use captured Architect shuttlecraft to slip through the defensive perimeter. Once aboard the Sovereign, they would fight their way to the command center. Then they would detonate a fusion device, A nuclear bomb powerful enough to destroy the ship from the inside. The explosion would be massive. Nobody nearby would survive. 54 operators volunteered for the mission. Jake Harper had to choose. He selected 36 of them. He divided them into 3 teams of 12 each. Each team had all the skills necessary to complete the mission. Demolitions experts, computer hackers, medics, shooters. If one team was compromised and killed, the other 2 could still succeed. Redundancy meant a better chance of mission. Success even if individuals died. They launched 6 hours before the architects were projected to reach Prime. The Council fleet engaged in a desperate holding action. They drew fire and attention, while the stealth frigate threaded through the massive space battle. Ships exploded all around them. Energy beams lit up the darkness of space. But the frigate stayed hidden, stayed quiet, moved carefully through the chaos. The insertion went smoothly at first. The captured shuttles passed through the architect's screening force without being challenged. The humans had good false identification codes. But as they approached the Sovereign itself, alarms began to sound throughout the enemy fleet. Someone had detected them. Someone knew they were coming. The element of surprise was gone. Jake ordered all teams to go loud. That meant stop being sneaky and start fighting. They were committed now. There was no turning back. The shuttles crashed through the Sovereign's hangar bay shields at full speed. They landed hard. The doors opened and operators poured out, immediately engaging every target in sight. The architects responded with overwhelming force. Hundreds of soldiers, automated defense turrets, energy barriers. But the humans had trained for exactly this scenario. They had practiced dying gloriously. They moved through the ship like a force of nature, clearing corridors, securing positions, killing everything that moved. The fighting was brutal and efficient. Team 2, led by Major Kevin Stone, took devastating casualties in the first 10 minutes. Half his team died in the initial assault. Kevin himself fell defending a critical choke point. He was buying time for his demolition specialist to reach the secondary reactor. His last words were a calm situation report delivered even as enemy fire tore through his body. He died doing his job. Team 3, commanded by Captain Ryan Bell, penetrated deepest into the ship before being cut off and surrounded. They fought for 40 minutes against impossible odds, surrounded and outnumbered by hundreds of enemies. Before their communications went silent forever, they reported that they had placed their explosive charges. The mission could still succeed even though they were dying. That was all that mattered to them. Jake Harper's Team 1 reached the command center with only 12 operators remaining. Half his team was already dead. Master Sergeant Nicole Carter provided covering fire with her rifle. She never missed. Every shot killed an enemy. Captain Danny Wright set up the main fusion device. His hands were steady even though he knew he was setting up his own death. Sergeant Chris Palmer held the entrance corridor against wave after wave of architect soldiers. His rifle grew hot from constant firing. The barrel glowed red. But he kept shooting, kept killing, kept buying time. Lieutenant Amy Hudson hacked the ship's computer systems one last time. She uploaded everything they had learned about architect technology, all their secrets, all their weaknesses. She sent it back to the Council fleet. It was information that would help finish the war if anyone survived to use it. Her final gift to the galaxy before she died. Danny reported that the charges were set. 15 minutes until detonation. 15 minutes left to live. Jake looked around at the remaining operators. His friends. His family. They all knew there was no extraction plan. There never had been one. This was always going to be a one-way trip. They had known that from the beginning and volunteered anyway. Jake asked if anyone had any last words. Nicole smiled despite everything. She said to tell the galaxy they were here. Tell them humans fought here. Tell them humans died here saving everyone. Make sure nobody forgot. Danny replied that the galaxy would know. They would definitely know. The explosion would be visible from planets away. Nobody would ever forget this day. The architects threw everything they had at the command center. Energy weapons that melted metal. Explosive charges that shook the walls. Hand-to-hand combat as ammunition ran low. The human operators fought with the determination of those who knew they were already dead. They just needed to last 15 more minutes. Just 15 minutes to save the galaxy. At 12 minutes, Chris Palmer fell. His rifle was finally empty. His body was broken, but his position had held. At 13 minutes, Amy Hudson was caught by shrapnel from an explosion. She died at her computer console with encrypted data still uploading. At 14 minutes, Danny Wright smiled at Jake and Nicole one last time. Then he charged the main entrance to buy them a few more precious seconds. He died fighting. At 15 minutes, only Jake and Nicole remained. They stood back to back in the command center as Architect soldiers finally breached the final door. Nicole said it was not a bad way to go out. Jake agreed. He said it could be worse. They could have died for nothing. At least this death meant something. At least they saved people. The fusion device detonated at 15 minutes and 30 seconds. The Sovereign? The memorial service was held at Primara Prime 6 months after the battle. Representatives from every council species attended. Billions more watched on broadcasts across the galaxy. They built a monument in the capital city, listing the names of every operator who had fallen during the war. The monument was made of black stone that reflected the sky. At the top, in letters that could be seen from orbit, were carved the words Humanity's Special Forces. Never forgotten. Admiral Patricia Hill stood before the monument. She was older now. The war had aged her. She carried scars that would never heal, both physical and mental. She thought about Jake Harper and his calm leadership under impossible pressure. She remembered Nicole Carter's unwavering accuracy and quiet determination. She thought about Danny Wright's selfless courage and his love for his family. She thought about all of them. Every single name on that wall. Heroes that the galaxy celebrated but few truly understood. They were not superhuman. They were just humans who refused to give up. Behind her, a new class of Special Forces candidates stood at attention in their training uniforms. They were volunteers, every single one of them. They volunteered despite knowing the cost. Despite understanding that this path led to places darker than most people could imagine. They had seen the casualty lists. They knew the statistics. They understood that many of them would not survive their careers, and yet they still raised their hands and said they would serve. They volunteered because someone had to do it, because the galaxy needed defenders willing to go where regular soldiers could not go, because humanity had learned through countless generations of warfare that sometimes the only way to ensure peace was to be terrifyingly good at war. Be so good that no one dared challenge you. Make potential enemies fear you more than they wanted whatever they were fighting for. The Architect Collective remembered what happened at the Sovereign. They told their children about it. They wrote it in their history books. They made sure future generations knew about the humans who infiltrated the greatest warship ever built. How 36 soldiers brought down a fleet of 3,000 ships. How they fought to the last breath without ever surrendering or breaking. How they chose certain death to protect others. The architects made it clear to their descendants that humanity was never to be provoked again. The cost was too high. The Vrex swarm remembered too. They called the human special forces the impossible ones. They said humans could walk through walls and appear from shadows. They said humans could not be killed because they were already dead inside. Already ghosts. They avoided human space with religious fervor. When Vrex ships detected human vessels, they jumped away immediately. They wanted no part of another confrontation. Their species had learned its lesson in blood. The Galactic Council remembered. They passed new laws protecting human special forces operators. They made sure these soldiers would never again be treated as mere resources to be used and discarded. They established better training programs and shared humanity's methods with those species capable of learning them. Not every species could produce soldiers like human special forces. Most lacked either the mental toughness or the cultural background. But those who could learn did so eagerly. They built a defense network based on human tactics. Small teams, precise strikes, psychological warfare. These became the new standard across council space. Trade routes expanded as peace settled across the galaxy. Worlds that had been isolated by war were reconnected. Refugees returned to their homes. Rebuilding began. Children born during the war grew up in peace, never knowing the fear their parents had lived through. The scars of conflict slowly healed as years passed, but humanity did not forget. Could not forget. In every human military academy, students learned about the Sovereign mission. They studied the tactics. They analyzed the decisions. They learned the names. Jake Harper, Nicole Carter, Danny Wright, Kevin Stone, Chris Palmer, Amy Hudson, Ryan Bell, Lisa Morgan. All 36 names were taught to every new generation of soldiers. These were not just names in a history book. They were examples, standards to live up to, proof of what humans could accomplish when pushed to their absolute limits. Sergeant First Class Lauren Davis still taught at Fort Braxton. Her injury had never fully healed, but she refused to retire. She had a new mission now, making sure the next generation understood what they were signing up for. She did not sugarcoat it, did not make it seem glamorous or exciting. She told them the truth. Special Forces work was brutal, lonely, and often thankless. You missed birthdays and holidays. You saw friends die. You did things that would haunt you forever. You sacrificed everything normal people took for granted, and yet, people still volunteered. Every year, hundreds applied. Most failed, some quit. A few succeeded and went on to serve with distinction. The cycle continued. It would always continue as long as there were humans who believed in something bigger than themselves. As long as there were people willing to sacrifice for others. That spirit was what made human special forces special, not their weapons or their training. Their spirit. Their refusal to quit. Their willingness to do what needed to be done regardless of personal cost. Captain Jennifer Wright visited the monument every year on the anniversary of her husband's death. She brought their children, now teenagers. They placed flowers at the base where Danny's name was carved. The kids asked questions about their father. What was he like? Was he brave? Did he love them? Jennifer answered honestly. He was brave but also scared sometimes. He loved them more than anything in the world. He died so they could grow up in peace. He chose them, chose everyone over himself. That was what made him a hero. The council established a new holiday called Remembrance Day. On this day every year, the entire galaxy paused to honor those who had fallen in the war. Special ceremonies were held at the monument on Primara Prime. Humans and aliens stood together, united by shared sacrifice and shared memory. They remembered not just the 36 who died on the Sovereign, but all the soldiers, sailors, pilots, and civilians who had given their lives. The cost of peace had been high. They made sure no one forgot that. Young species joining the council now received standard briefings about humanity. These briefings explained human history, culture, and military capabilities. They learned about the wars humans had fought among themselves before reaching space. They learned about human persistence and adaptability. And they learned about special forces. The briefings were clear. Never provoke humanity. Never threaten human worlds. Never make humanity choose between peace and survival. Because when humans felt threatened, when they believed they had no choice, they became something terrifying, something unstoppable. Some species called this fear-mongering. They said it was propaganda meant to make humans seem more dangerous than they really were. These skeptics pointed out that humans were still physically weak compared to many species. They lacked natural weapons or armor. They were not particularly fast or strong. Their technology, while good, was not exceptional. How dangerous could they really be? The architects and the Vrex could answer that question. They had learned the hard way. Humans were dangerous not because of what they had, but because of what they would do. They would endure any hardship, survive any environment, adapt to any challenge, and when necessary, they would sacrifice everything to protect what they loved. That combination of traits made them the most dangerous species in known space. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but the most dangerous when threatened. As decades passed, the war became history. People who had not lived through it struggled to understand what it had been like. The fear, the uncertainty, the daily wondering if today would be the day your world fell. New generations grew up in peace and prosperity. They learned about the war in schools, but it seemed distant and unreal. Like something from ancient history rather than something their parents and grandparents had survived. But the veterans remembered. They carried those memories until the day they died. They gathered once a year at the monument, their numbers shrinking as time passed. They told stories. They laughed about the good times. They cried about the bad times. They made sure the names on the monument were more than just carved letters. They were people, friends, brothers and sisters in arms, heroes who deserved to be remembered not as legends or myths, but as the flawed, brave humans they had been. Admiral Patricia Hill retired eventually. She was too old to command fleets anymore. Her body had taken too much damage over the years. But she never stopped advocating for Special Forces operators. She made sure they had the resources they needed, the support they deserved. She fought for better medical care, better mental health treatment, better support for their families. She spent her retirement making sure that future operators would not have to sacrifice as much as her generation had. The galaxy was at peace. Trade flourished. Art and culture blossomed. New species joined the council. Old enemies became friends. The scars of war faded, though they never disappeared completely. And through it all, human special forces continued their work. Smaller missions now, hostage rescues, counterterrorism, humanitarian aid in disaster zones. They were still there, still training,
Still ready.
still willing to do whatever was necessary, because the galaxy had learned an important